You're listening to the Served Up Show, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful content. Your hostesses, Bridget Albert, is best known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with over 25 years of experience. And I'm Julie Milroy, best known for my passion for leading change and helping others grow in their careers. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry.
Hey y'all, it's Bridget here. I had the honor and pleasure of chatting with Jenny Pfanenstiel. Jenny Pfanenstiel is the featured milliner of the Kentucky Derby and the second milliner to be featured by Churchill Downs in 148 years. When she's not busy making derby hats, she's creating hat collections for Vineyard Vines, J. Peterman, Keeneland, and some really fun bourbon brands. She's also the hat designer for McCall's Patterns and the author of the book, The Making of a Milliner. So go grab yourself a mint julep, sit back, and enjoy this very special episode. Jen, welcome to Served Up. I'm so excited to have you on our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Wonderful. Can you tell our listeners where you're tuning in from today?
I'm in downtown Louisville, Kentucky.
Amazing. And, for our listeners and for my purpose as well, can you talk a bit about your craft as a hat maker and really what brought you into, what you do?
That's a loaded question. So let's see, where do I begin? So I've been sewing since I was 5 years old. I grew up with my mom and my aunt and grandma all sewing clothes and the dolls I played with. And so I started cross stitching when I was little. And that naturally led me to go to fashion design school, which I went to the Art Institute of Colorado in Denver, and wanted to pursue costumes. And honestly, I thought I'd live in Colorado and make costumes for the ballet. But when I lived in Colorado, if you weren't making Western wear or ski wear, there weren't a lot of other options. So I chose to move to Chicago and pursue costume design. And I made costumes for Cirque du Soleil. I did a Grammy dress for Margaret Cho, different commercials and movies, and Joffrey Ballet, Goodman Theater, and loved it. And I ended up going to a presentation of a milliner in downtown Chicago that was from New York. I don't believe she's in business any longer, but she was talking about the traditional techniques of hat making and how they date back over 200 years and molding material over old wooden forms. And I'm an old soul to begin with, so I am attracted to how things were done back in the day. And I just loved her story and just learning about how hats were made, because I had no idea how hats were traditionally made. So I wanted to learn more about it. And so I started looking into seeing if I could take some courses, and there really wasn't a lot offered in the United States. So I ended up doing an apprenticeship in Australia and learning the traditional techniques of hat making, and which is blocking material over old wooden hat forms of all different shapes and styles and sizes. And since I knew how to hand sew, it just came natural. And I thought, this is what I'm meant to do. Light bulb went off. So I started dabbling in hat making in my basement in Chicago and started selling my hats at different art shows. And that's kind of how I got my name out there and people wearing my stuff. And one of the shows that I did, the woman next to me was from Louisville, Kentucky. And she asked me, she's like, have you ever thought of making derby hats? And I'll be honest, just because I'm not from Kentucky, I grew up in the military. My father was in the Air Force, but I never lived in the South. So I had heard of the derby, but I didn't really know what it was. And then I realized, oh, wow, people really wear hats to the Derby. So the following year I went to Kentucky and started making custom hats. And I went there for 6 years, believe it or not, with hats out of my trunk, selling to different stores and setting up a hotel for 3 months at a time and bringing my hat blocks and sewing machines and doing different trunk shows. And during that time, I fell in love with Kentucky, the people. I was really amazed at how supportive the town was for small businesses. Being in Chicago, it was obviously very different, considering my showroom was in my home, in my dining room. So it took a couple of years to talk my husband into leaving the Cubs and the Blackhawks, but we wanted to start a family ultimately and move out of the city. And so I think it's been 9 years since we moved here to Kentucky. And I opened up a little art studio, and now I've grown into a really amazing hat shop, which is where I am right now.
And I've had the honor and the pleasure of visiting your hat shops, but I want to, just take it back a little bit. Can you tell our listeners, really what a milliner is and what does it take to have that title?
So a milliner is someone who makes hats from scratch. So you're not a hat decorator in a sense where you're buying a hat base already made and then decorating it. And there's a lot of people who do that, and there's nothing wrong with that because sometimes people just prefer the decorating process and not the actual forming of the hat. But an actual milliner is someone who takes the raw materials of straw or felt, whatever it may be, and actually wetting and steaming and forming it over molds of different shapes and sizes. And it takes, it could take 3 or 4 days just to block a hat and finish it, if not longer, depending on what you're doing.
And what does blocking mean?
It's where, so the forms that I use to make hats, they come in particular shapes of basically the hats that you see out there. Those are all formed over a mold of some sort of that shape. And mine just happened to be made out of wood. That's how they started out. Sometimes they're now made out of metal, especially if they're mass produced and stamped out. But most are still made out of wood. And you form the raw material, which comes a lot like fabric. It's in yardage a lot of times, or it's hand woven into like a cone shape. And then you wet and steam it and use a little bit of elbow grease and get all the pleats and wrinkles out and mold over the form. And then it dries and then you put it together. I hope that makes sense. You can visualize.
Yes. So those of us that are not milliners, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And I know that you're very, very humble, and we'll get into the Kentucky Derby and all the fun things that you've done with different bourbon brands and all the great things. But, tell me what it was like, to open up that first shop. And then I want to hear more about your place as well. That's in the town that you live in LaGrange as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that journey and don't forget to mention like what it's called, the address, and all that good stuff too.
Oh, yes, sure. Absolutely. Well, when we first moved to Kentucky, because I had never had a store or studio outside the home, it certainly was very nerve-wracking. But I knew that this was the step that I needed to take my business to the next level if this was really what I was going to do, which was kind of the whole goal of moving to Kentucky, was to expand the hat business and take it to a level that I couldn't accomplish in Chicago. So I remember, I think my first place was 300 square feet, I believe it was. And it was in this place called the Melwood Art Center, which was filled with other artist studios and retail and restaurants and antique mall. And so it was a really nice community environment. I didn't feel so isolated. But I remember thinking, how am I going to pay rent on a 300 square foot place? And Barb, my husband was like, well, just sell one hat a month and you'll be fine. So, I quickly grew out of that space, and then I moved into 650 square foot place in the same complex. And again, very worried about paying rent, but, I just had to put trust in what I did. And just the fact that I picked up and moved from Chicago to begin with to open up my business, I knew that there was no looking back and that I just had to just look forward regardless of what obstacles came before me. And this allowed me also to, grow my clientele. People started to know that I had a shop and would come see me year round, because I don't just make hats for Derby, but for all seasons and occasions. But I was at Melwood for 5 years and I was growing out of my space. And Melwood didn't have any further places for me to move. And so where I am now, the gentleman who they call Butcher Block King, because that's kind of in the area that we're in, he's taken all these old dilapidated homes and created and turned them into commercial spaces. So I'm in my own little cottage. And I think I'm now in like 1,500 square feet or so. But it's great because it's like an old little cottage, little home, shotgun place. And, all the neighbors around me are in a similar situation. And I just love it because it's my own little hat shop. And I'll give my address. It's I'm in the Nulu Butchertown area, which is near the downtown area of Louisville. So it's 1009 East Main Street in Louisville. I'm open regular hours, not just on the web. So Tuesday through Saturdays. You don't have to have an appointment to come in. But for me, I wanted to be more than just a retail shop, just a typical retail shop. I really wanted my clients to have an experience when they came in. So even from the outside of my store, I have this custom archway that has these top hat planters on them with, of course, the Formé Millinery hat shop sign. When you walk into the door, there's French music playing because Formé is French for formed, Formé Millinery. And so you're greeted by French music. You see finished hats that are on the walls. You also are amongst all the molds that I use to create hats. And then in the further back into the shop is my personal workspace where you see raw materials. And with regards to that experience that I want to create for my customers is, especially if you're coming in to get a custom piece, sometimes people have never worn a hat. So it's a matter of trying on different styles and seeing what works with your physique, face shape, hair length, height, all that. And, and even just wearing the hat properly makes a big difference. But once we pick out a face shape, then we look at the raw materials. If you're coordinating it with an outfit, sometimes people bring their outfits in, and then we look at all the embellishments that I use and, really put a custom hat together made just for that person. So it's really a great, fun process.
Yeah, it is a magical place. It really is. You just feel your energy in there. And then I know that you also offer classes, right? Hat making classes as well.
Yes, that's right. I love keeping this craft alive. And if I can teach others how to make a hat from scratch, because for me, the more people that wear hats, the better, whether I'm putting the hat on their head or not. I look at it as, hats as an accessory, just like a piece of jewelry would be or a handbag. So it's really the cherry on top to an outfit, in my opinion. So I teach hat making workshops, a few different types. I do teach hat classes where you learn from scratch. So they're like 2 or 3 day classes. You mold over the wooden forms just like I would. I provide all the millinery materials. But then I also do speed hat making workshops. So I typically do those during like Derby time where my time is limited, or maybe someone else doesn't have a whole lot of time. Maybe they're visiting the city and don't have 2 or 3 days to dedicate to hat making. So in speed workshops, I focus more on the embellishments. So I'll do different feather techniques. feather flower techniques, sculpting horsehair, and then we finish a hat or a fascinator in like a 3-hour course. So yeah.
That's super cool. Can you tell us about your second location in LaGrange as well? And then we'll get into the meat of it all, the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, absolutely. So about 25 miles from Louisville is a town called LaGrange, Kentucky. You'll find lots of horse farms out there, distilleries, just really beautiful country. So that's where my family lives. And they have a little main street and super cute. And never did we think we would have another location out there. But a woman named Judith had approached us because she wanted to retire from her business. And her business is called Judith M. Millinery Supply House. It's one of 3 millinery supply houses left in the United States. And when I say millinery supply house, that's where someone like myself would buy the raw millinery materials to make my hats from scratch. The supply house also provides millinery materials to like Disney, movie production houses, universities that have a millinery course, where we send out millinery materials to those places for their costume and millinery departments to then make hats for their projects. So Judith had approached us about actually continuing her legacy because she wanted to retire after 30 years. And we were in the middle of a pandemic. My husband and I thought we were crazy, but we couldn't see what she created die. And considering it was one of 3 left in the United States, I think it was like a year and a half it took because of COVID. We had started right before COVID started. And then with COVID, it just delayed everything with loans and just everything. So, but after about a year and a half, we were able to purchase the business. And because she had created such a clientele, we kept the name, the website, everything. And then opened a retail store in LaGrange, Kentucky. And what's funny is that she was from LaGrange, Indiana. And if you're not familiar with LaGrange, Indiana, it's near Shipshewana, which is Amish country. And when you go there, you really truly see people in horse and buggy there everywhere. So she didn't have a retail store. She was strictly online. So we've also figured that was a sign, LaGrange, Indiana to LaGrange, Kentucky. So we moved everything to our retail store. And with Derby, of course, we thought there was a need for retail. But in addition to millinery supplies, we, of course, sell to our little town and anybody stopping by, just everyday type hats for people to come in and get a sun hat or a winter hat or whatever they may need.
One of the unique things that I found when I was, visiting LaGrange and visiting you and your family was the train that goes through the center of your town and the main street. It is the craziest, almost like it jarred me. I was in your was in your hat shop and it actually made me jump. Can you just talk about how very special that is and how unique?
Yes. So for any train enthusiasts, if you don't already know, LaGrange, Kentucky is one of 2 towns in the United States where our train actually goes on Main Street over a car lane. So if you're driving in that lane, you will get hit by the train. It's that way on Main Street. And you can actually watch our train track on train websites and actually see our train go through Main Street because it's such a big deal, apparently. But yes, we've had people where the train has come and they're on that side of the road and they don't know what to do and they get hit. My car was actually involved in an accident because someone didn't get out of the way, didn't know what to do. And I can totally understand that. You don't realize, a train can't pass me. It should, but it can't. And then my car just happened to be parked and scrape. And then the train had to stop and it was an ordeal. But,
it is so fun. I highly recommend listeners, if you are visiting Kentucky, to check out LaGrange. It is a sweet little town and just seeing the train zip down the middle of Main Street is a wild experience. Now I want to, fast forward ahead a bit to the Kentucky Derby because, if you watch any of the coverage, before Derby Day or on Derby Day, you will see Jenny Pfanenstiel on your TV. She is incredibly humble, just incredibly humble about everything that you've done in your career. And you truly are the milliner for the Kentucky Derby. I know that your hats are featured in the Kentucky Derby Museum. And I would like to, really dive into how did that happen?
Well, lots of networking and just bringing my little sales girl out and trying to create these relationships that, where I felt I could bring value to their organization. And just a lot of times it's just years of conversation. And, Churchill Downs, the Kentucky Derby, this will be their 149th year of the Kentucky Derby. And so I approached them because I thought I could bring value to Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby in the sense that hats are a tradition going to the Derby. And with me being local, I thought that I could not just be a featured milliner for the Kentucky Derby, but I could also provide experiences for the clients that come to the Derby and, do hat shop tours, talk about the process of hat making and really provide a unique experience for those coming to town to get that special hat to attend the races. Because for a lot of people, it's on their bucket list. So they've never been to Kentucky. They've never been to the Derby. So, I think by having this wonderful partnership with Churchill Downs, I'm able to provide a unique experience for all the goers going to the Derby.
You absolutely do. Can you talk about the tradition of the hats at the Kentucky Derby? Because folks, if you've never been to the Kentucky Derby, it is a real thing. You want to show up there with your best hat. And usually a lot of the hats are so over the top as well.
Yes. So hats were always a staple from day one. But through the years, they've certainly expanded into different styles, and you'll see a little bit of everything at the Derby. And people really do wear hats. Every person, if you are not wearing a hat, you will stand out. And I know people who come from out of town there, sometimes they think, oh, I'm just going to grab a casual hat and wear that. Or they'll think, oh, I'm just not going to wear a hat. And then they get here and they realize how big of a deal your whole outfit is, let alone your hat. And then they go, oh, well, I guess I need to change that. It's almost like planning a wedding for a lot of attendees. You're getting your outfit, your handbag, your jewelry, your shoes, and then of course, coordinating the hat with your outfit. You will certainly see a little bit of everything. If you compare it to like the Royal Ascot in London, there's a very, very strict dress code. Your hat has to be a certain size and so forth. Well, with the Derby, anything goes. So you will certainly see, big plastic horses on hats and, big fluffy feathers. And, it's just, it's actually really fun to go. A lot of people think they go and see the horses at the track. But I think most of the time people go just to see the hats because it is your statement piece. And, you will more than likely be photographed. And so, but, for those, putting aside for those that have fun with it and kind of do something a little over the top, for the most part, people take going to the Derby very seriously and their outfit, as they should. And that's when they come to someone like myself that can truly make a custom, one-of-a-kind piece that they won't see themselves, walking, in the booth next to them. So it's really a really fun experience. And a lot of people go all out because it's something they do a lot of times just once.
Can you talk about your experience? Like, what does a day look like for you at the Kentucky Derby?
Usually I'm sleeping. No, I'm just joking. But, my Derby honestly starts when Derby ends. Because I do collaborations with several companies and their Derby collections, I'm creating thousands of hats or fascinators for these collaborations, that those samples that I'm getting out to them are starting a month or so right after Derby. As far as custom work, I mean, I'm getting custom work right now for Derby in December, and Derby is always the first Saturday in May. So I'm extremely busy leading up to Derby, and especially April, because here we're not just in Kentucky, and especially Louisville, we're not just busy on Derby Day. Our town really celebrates Derby, and I would say it's at least a month of just Derby frenzy, parties, parades, galas, you name it. Our whole town just goes crazy preparing for Derby. So yes. So leading up to Derby, I'm doing photo shoots. I'm doing interviews on TV, being featured in magazines. Because I'm featured milliner of the Kentucky Derby, I'm working with their media people, sometimes the Today Show. And there's all the local newscast, of course. And then on Derby Day, yes, it starts at like 3 a.m., I think, 3 or 4 a.m. at the track. You're on the backside, you're with the horses, warming up, and you're just talking about the day and how fun it's going to be and all that good stuff. But it's all of this leads up to that day, which is just really, really exciting.
It really is. Like, if you tune in on that day, you're definitely going to see Jenny on the screen at some point. I know I have. I think it's so cool. I think it's wonderful. Yeah, I celebrate you and what you do. It's just incredible. Would you be open to talk about some of the ways that the bourbon community in Kentucky have really embraced yourself and and you as a milliner?
Yes, absolutely. So one of my favorite bourbons is Woodford Reserve, and they usually are the bourbon of the Kentucky Derby. And they are based out of Versailles, which is about an hour or so from Louisville. And obviously, being a big fan, I thought, how can I, because I'm always being, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not just a hat maker, but I'm also always looking at where can I take my brand? How can I expand it? What partnerships can I grow or create? So I thought, how wonderful would it be to work with a bourbon company like Woodford Reserve and create an exclusive hat collection for them and utilize their bourbon in some way. So last year was my first partnership with them, and we're going to continue it again this year. But I created 2 hat styles. One was a fedora and one was a brimmed hat. And we took their bourbon barrel heads and laser cut wooden bow ties for the fedoras and wooden roses for the brimmed hats. And we did this fun little style with little bourbon barrels on it and my logo and Woodford's logo. And we put that on all the hats. And it was an exclusive limited edition collection. You also received a co-branded Woodford Reserve bourbon bottle, which was really cool for me because to see my name on a Woodford bottle. But, and then our little Woodford bourbon barrel hang tag told our story and our little partnership together. So it was such an honor to partner with a brand like them. And it did really well. And I'm really grateful for that partnership and look forward to the future with them.
Yeah, I think that's such an incredible story, going from your home in Chicago and then all the way, to partnering with the Kentucky Derby. Can you talk about some of maybe the celebrities that you've styled or some of the hats that you've done and some of the really amazing magazines that you've been part of and the fashion shows as well?
Sure. So I have made hats for Oprah Winfrey. It was actually specific to when Kate Middleton got married. The Oprah show still existed in Chicago. where she would have a live audience. So I actually made hats for her staff and for her. And when Kate was getting married, they simulcast to a person in England, and the staff served tea and crumpets to the audience, and they were all wearing my hats, and she was wearing my hat. And so that was quite fun. I've made hats for Michelle Obama, for Karen Pence, for Madonna, Barbara Corcoran. She's from Shark Tank. I've done several for her for the Derby. She's a lot of fun. Neil Diamond. Yeah. And as far as magazines, we were just, about almost a year ago, we were featured on, Judith M was featured on HGTV, Hometown Kickstart on HGTV. And they did a little blurb about LaGrange, about it being a small town and all the great things that happen there. And so Allison Victoria, she does Windy City Rehab in Chicago. She was our host in LaGrange. And so I made her a custom hat. So you'll see me and my husband on that show. I was recently featured in Where Women Create, which is one of my favorite publications by Jo Packham. She does Where Women Create, What Women Create, and What Women Cook. And it's just a really great collaboration of all these amazing artists from all over the world. And I was very fortunate to have a 16-page spread in it that just came out.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
oh my God, brava. That is amazing.
Yes. Even my daughter's in a couple pages. So it's really cool. But it talks about the process, talks about my story. And, they had asked if I had any shop pets, which I don't, but I guess you can call my daughter my shop pet. But she'll be the next milliner to talk about, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, that's absolutely. Well, what is next for you, Jenny? Like, what are you thinking about for the future?
I do have some things in the works because, of course, I'm always thinking of what's next and what can I do. We're obviously one big happy hat family. I'd love to even consider opening a hat museum. There are no hat museums in the United States. And so I'd love to do something like that here in Kentucky. It's going to take some time, of course, but I'd like to do it right and really create an amazing experience for people to be able to come and learn about hats and how it relates to Kentucky. But also just seeing all the old machines and processes of how millinery exists and still does today.
Yeah. And especially because you're really bringing back that craft, right? You're really putting it in the spotlight in such an interesting, unique, beautiful way, and still always staying true to yourself, and your style. And just bringing your personality into each and every project that you do. And that in itself is such a beautiful talent that you have.
Thank you.
It's just an amazing thing. So, on behalf of Served Up, Jenny, I want to wish you all of my best and just some great health and a whole lot of peace.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Sometimes I forget what I've done and where I started. Not that I forget, but sometimes when I talk about my accomplishments or my accolades, I have to pinch myself because I'm like, who's that fabulous lady? Just because I know where I started and just in my basement in Chicago and just doing it kind of for fun and to think that this is where I am now. I'm so just grateful that I do what I do and can make a living at it. And, I never dread coming to my hat shop, I'm just so grateful that I get to do what I love and help people put a smile on their face.
Yep. And you sure do. My gosh. And you absolutely do. Well, cheers to you, Jenny. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you. Oh, my pleasure. I'm very grateful.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of future Served Up episodes. Cheers!